And welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I'm your host, Daren Jaime. We'll bring you a forum discussing and providing deeper issues and the inequities that people face. We're going to tackle those and talk about those. We present multiple points of view as well as promote civic engagement. We encourage you to stay tuned. The Social Justice Forum starts now. And welcome back. Our first guest recently introduced comprehensive legislation to create free universal child care in New York City. The bill, Intro 941, goes beyond proposing a slate of fixes to an inherently broken system to fully reimagine child care and create equal access and equity for all. Now, the bill's comprehensive plan looks to both ease the financial and logistical burdens on families accessing child care, as well as support and expand the early child care workforce. Joining us now to discuss more is the New York City Council member of District Number 12 in person, Kevin C. Riley.
Thank you so much. How you doing, good brother?
Good to see you, man. How's everything going?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well.
Good.
It's glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. Glad to be in person for a change, right?
Most definitely.
Let me talk to you about a couple things. First of all, I want to talk to you about this child care because you introduced this legislation. And for many New Yorkers, it's a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
Because a recent report just came out saying if you're going to live in New York, you need pretty much $100,000 in income just to be able to take care of how you live, not mentioning child care.
Correct. When you look at inflation throughout the nation, it's up. Families are struggling. We're feeling it. My wife and I, we have 3 beautiful children, all under 8 years old. Child care is a huge concern for my family and families in the Northeast Bronx and throughout New York City. Introducing this piece of legislation was just our way of trying to figure out how we could address this issue. When you look at an individual child, it costs roughly about $19,000 to $20,000 a year for child care for a family. So you look at families like myself, we have 3 children, that's roughly about $60,000. And there's families throughout New York City that are struggling with the same issues. But we do have systems out there that can address these issues, but the systems have to be addressed and they have to be more transparent and accessible for families to actually get these resources that are out there. So it's a very huge issue that's going on within our communities.
So let's take a deeper dive into 941. What does the bill entail and call for that New Yorkers need to know about?
So it's called for opening up an Office of Child Care Services where we can figure out how we can get to universal child care. This is going to take a city and state partnership because we do know that this is going to be a tax on New York City. In order to do that, but I don't want anyone to view it as that. I want everyone to view it as an investment. When you look at how much money we're losing from the workforce, $22 billion, because people aren't working. A lot of families aren't going out to work because it is more financially equitable for them to stay home and manage childcare instead of going inside the office and working and actually obtaining a job or, a career for their family. So when you're looking at a specific bill like this, we're trying to address this issue by creating this office to figure out how can we come to a space where we can get universal child care. And not only get universal child care, actually make it accessible for providers within our communities to be able to get grants, start up their child care businesses. We have a lot of home providers that are having child care businesses as well that are very beneficial to us. And when we look at the development of our child, as a parent, it's not only up to us to develop our child. We wish we can stay home every single day from 24/7, just, helping our child develop, learn things. But it takes a village. When we heard that term growing up, it really takes a village. It takes your child care providers. It takes your faith-based institutions. It takes your community-based organizations like the community centers. We all play a role in helping the child be developed. And that's what this bill wants to do. It wants to help providers as well obtain the proper training within the workforce so they're able to provide, adequate child care services for our kids.
There's a concern that when you have child care providers out there right now, there's already some challenges. We know about, several that have been under investigation, things of that nature. When you have this kind of bill going forward, you have your critics who speak, hey, this may not be a great thing. How do you speak to that?
Like I said, I think I want to view it as an investment. We have to continue to invest in our children, especially today. As the world is advancing, we're going into a technological space. Our kids have to be more advanced earlier than how we were growing up. Our kids now, my daughter's playing with iPads now. She knows how to go on her iPad and look up certain stuff and do research. When we were growing up, it took us to get to college to know how to go on a computer and do those things. So our kids are being invested in more earlier. And when you think of childcare, when you think of a family's holistic way of raising their child, you want to make sure you're providing these services like childcare, so you're providing the development resources that our children need, to succeed in this world. To the critics out there that think that this is going to be something negative, I don't think it's going to be something negative, because this office will create open space that these childcare providers can receive the proper trainings that they need and the proper resources that they can succeed in today's society.
So bring us up to speed as to where the bill is right now and what's happening.
Right now we have about 30 members in the city council. We're looking to get some more members in city council so we can actually get it pushed through. It's been heard in the committee already, so all we're looking to do is gain more support within city council, and then we're going to get this passed.
How many do you think you need?
Hopefully we get about 5 to 6 more, and then we'll be good.
How's it been going?
It's been good. It's been good, man. I think a lot of people are opened up. A lot of people are contacting their local council members. It's not only an issue for families. It's been an issue for a lot of working corporations as well, because they want to get people back into the office. They want to get people back into work. The city right now, if you look at the vacancies that are going on in the city with employment, it's ridiculous. So there's a lot of vacancies out there. So it's not only going to benefit the families, it's going to benefit the economy in New York City.
Yeah. Let me switch fronts for a minute and have an opportunity to talk about what else is going on in the community. Because, you're dealing on a local level what we deal with on a national level, which is gun violence.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a lot, and communities hit hard.
Yeah.
Your assessment on how you're seeing, because you've been out there, boots on the ground. What you've seen the families and the mothers and the community. What's your thoughts?
Gun violence is a national issue, which is really crippling us locally. Recently, about a week or two ago, I had a shooting in my district that was in the train station. It was a 17-year-old, and just recently I found out it was another 17-year-old that shot the gun. Dealing with gun violence, the accessibility to guns within our community today is little to none. Like, kids could get guns these days quicker than they could get an M&Ms or a Snicker bar. It's really ridiculous. And if we're thinking about the trafficking of guns, it has to start from a national level, and we have to raise some more noises, and that's how we have to come together with election time and make sure we get the right representatives in there so we can deal with it. But on the local level, it's going to take a lot more of community coming together. So something I've been doing within my communities, I've been dealing with some younger boys from a specific high school in my district, and going inside and kind of just speaking to them. I was doing a school visit earlier this year, and some young boys came into the room and was like, "Mr. Riley, we love the things that we see online, the things that you're doing. Would you mind coming here and just giving us some guidance?" And really, when they came in the room and spoke to me and asked me to do that, that really touched me, because when I was growing up, I really wanted somebody to do that to me as well. Because it's nothing different from when we were growing up to right now.
Right.
Dealing with emotion, dealing with conflict within our community, is just that the fact when we were growing up, it wasn't as easy and accessible to get a gun. When you're a child growing up and you're still a teenager, your mind is still developing. And that's what these children are. Their minds are still developing. But for them to deal with conflict resolution, that's not something that we teach to our students. Right. And when you're dealing with social emotional wellness, that's something we're teaching now to our students, and we have to rev it up a little bit. So my issue with gun violence is we have to teach our youth, or even people within our community, a better way to resolve conflicts. Each argument, each shoulder bump, each what you're looking at in the community, each Twitter this or Instagram, TikTok this, should not result into you picking up a firearm and ending someone's life. Because once you end someone's life, you also ended your life, because that person's demons is going to be living on you now moving forward. So this issue with gun violence is going to take a holistic approach. I think a lot of people in the community need to work together. Our communities are divided. Even when you look at our communities now, I represent a very diverse community, but it's a hard time for me to get one part of the district to come and celebrate in another part of the district. And we don't realize how that's trickling down to our youth.
Right.
So if I represent Co-op City, and it's challenging for me to get Co-op City to come over to Edenwald, to experience the new YMCA we have over there, because people in Co-op City don't feel comfortable coming over and eat a wall. That's going to trickle down to our youth. Because I asked one of my young boys who lives in Co-op City to come over to meet me at the YMCA at Edenwald, because I go in the YMCA, I spend time with the youth. That's most important. I invest money, but I also invest my time with the youth. So I spend time with them, I play ball, I just, you know what I mean? They just want to feel the energy around them. But it's an issue asking them to come over there because they don't want to be around that neighborhood.
Right.
So if we're not going to lead by example, it's going to be a challenge for our youth to lead too.
Do you feel as though there's enough out there for them? Because when we talk about alternatives, we talk about conflict resolution. That happens in a community center sometimes. That happens in a place where a young person can come, you know, and when we see all this great development that goes on, we see all, you know, and I'm not gonna say it's great development, I'll just say development. There's development that's going on. But one thing that gets underdeveloped sometimes is the lack of sufficient resources or new resources for kids in Black and brown communities.
Yeah, you look at modernized resources.
Right.
You know what I mean? When you look at, you can't put a pool table in a room with 4 walls and pictures on it and call it a community center and then invite children in it today.
Right.
Kids are not going to want to go in that room today. Kids will go into a basketball court if you give them access to it, which a lot of kids don't have access. I'm in the neighborhood.
Right.
A lot of kids don't have access to these. Like, look at our schools. Our schools are like the neighborhood community center.
Yeah.
They have rooms. They have accessibility to the cafeteria, which will give you food. They have accessibility to gyms, gymnasiums, equipment for you to exercise with. But giving access to the community to utilize it has been a challenge. And like I said, you can't just put pool tables, this in the room and think kids are gonna want to come here and utilize the space. You have to make it more modernized for the youth. Our kids are gaming now. Gaming's a huge thing.
Huge.
Let's make a gaming room. Let's put a safe space for them to game. They want to play Call of Duty, Roblox, NBA 2K. Put a room in the community for them to play that. Our kids are into music. I know everyone has a big hurrah over drill music, whatever, but who cares? Our kids are into producing music. The fact that they're talented enough to produce a music, I can't produce a song.
Right.
You understand?
Neither can I.
I can't produce a song.
Right.
I don't have the courage to produce a song. I don't have the courage to make a music video. I don't have the courage to put it on YouTube. Our kids have the courage. Why don't we create a safe space and give them the knowledge and work with all these individuals that are from our communities? All these hip hop artists are from our communities. We have 1 and 2 of the top radio stations in our city.
Right.
Let's figure out a way to be more, hands-on and listen to our youth, because they're showing us what they're interested in.
Right.
It's just that we're not providing the resources to show them. And that's what we're trying to do right now in District 12.
So we always hear from the public, hey, call the councilman, he'll be able to do something. How much are you literally able to do with the leverage that you have as a city councilman to be able to stop gap? Can you put money there? Do you have the authority to do that?
Well, we do a lot of investments on public space within my community. Within the last 2 years, this is my third year going into office, we were able to bring back close to $97 million in the district. And that is invested on public spaces. I invested a lot of money in parks, because these are spaces that kids use, these are spaces that families use, these are spaces that community members use, seniors, veterans, it doesn't matter. Everyone utilizes these spaces. I'm investing money in libraries. I invested $10.6 million. Speaker Hasty invested some money in the library as well, in Edenwald Library. I find catchment areas within the community that have been disinvested for years. And I try to invest in the holistic area in that community so I can show everyone in the community it's not just this one area I'm investing in. I'm going to invest capital investments. I'm going to invest expense investments so I can do programming in that area, but I'm also going to invest time. Right. I'm going to go into those schools. I'm going to go into those community centers. I'm going to go into that neighborhood. I'm going to make sure I'm connecting with people, and I'm going to get credible messages. Because the thing about it is we're trying to be credible. I represent a system. I'm an elected official. Right. A lot of times people don't trust politicians. You know what I mean? Half the time I don't even wear a suit.
Right.
Because I want you to know I'm Kev.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm Kevin from District 12, Uptown. I'm from your area, and I want to make sure that you're comfortable with coming to me if you have an issue. But I want to find credible messengers within my district that can help me not only speak to the youth, but bridge the gap between our youth and our seniors, because there's so much wisdom there. There's so much guidance there, but we don't have that bridge that we can actually have those conversations. So that's what we're doing within our community. So when it comes to what does a council member have power to, I have power to connect dots. Right. If I don't have the power to do it, let's work together and figure out who has the power to do it, and let's connect these dots.
Yeah. Let me get at another thing. I only got a few more minutes left, but I want to talk about right there in your community, small business, right?
Yeah.
You got a lot of small businesses out there that are really, some of them are literally on life support after COVID, right? You would assess the same thing, right?
Course,
and
of course.
So what are we doing in terms of really looking at addressing the small business issue? We know a lot of people in our borough didn't even get the PPP. It was out there, it was available, and now they're left to like fend for themselves. How do you see being able to get small business in recovery in your district?
Well, specifically in my district, I don't have a business improvement district. I don't have a bid in my district. So that's something I've been fighting for, to get a bid on White Plains Road. White Plains Road has the potential to be a very booming commercial district. If you look at it throughout the years, it hasn't been invested in. There's no bid there. A lot of businesses have been trickling out. A lot of businesses, you don't even know what they're doing on White Plains Road. So we've been able to conduct 2 walkthroughs with the Small Business Commissioner to speak, I think 2 to 3 walkthroughs with the Small Business Commissioner to speak to a lot of the business owners, have them buy in, but also talk about the infrastructure that's trickling White Plains Road as well. Not just White Plains Road, you have Gunner Road in my district, you have Boston Road, but specifically on White Plains Road, that's where we're trying to bring the bid, because it has potential to be a very booming district because it's accessible to the train station. A lot of people can utilize it. So it's really connecting our small businesses, because many businesses within our district aren't connected with the Bronx Chambers. They aren't connected with SBS. So when we were going around with Commissioner Kim, and he was just letting them know about a lot of the programs that are out there and grants that are out there, and we connected them, they were able to apply for them. And that's something that I think is very important. And also helping them with this new modernized time that we're living in. Right. A lot of them aren't online. They don't have any accessibility online to purchase things. A lot of us are purchasing groceries online and having it delivered to our house. So times are changing. So making sure that our small businesses have access to these new resources that can help them convert to a modernized time.
Do you find that that's the biggest challenge right there, the access to resources? Because when I talk to the business owners in your area and have been with the business owners in your area, and we talk about certain things, I don't know about that. I didn't know about that. Yeah. And it's almost like a light goes on when you talk to them, because they haven't really.
That's New York City's biggest issues. I think New York City, we have so much great programming out there. It's just that people don't know about it.
Right.
Even look what you guys do here at BronxNet. You guys do so much give back to the community. But if you ask somebody at a school if they knew about that, they would be like, oh, I had no idea. So I think we have to create a more holistic way where we could speak with each other and connect the dots on how we get the information out there. And how we market it. I think a lot more people are online more now, so we have to make sure that, like you guys have an app now. Right. We need to figure out ways that we can get this information to people faster, so they can actually know about it. And I'm actually hosting a small business event on May 3rd at District 12's Community Board. We're going to be doing on 229th and White Plains Road, and I'm inviting everybody to come through for small businesses to get some resources and some information.
I'm glad we were able to connect here.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, good. We're out of time, but listen.
I appreciate you, man.
Pleasure. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kevin Riley. I want to take a quick break. We'll be back with more on the Social Justice Forums right after this.
We all know what it's like to feel alone. But it just takes one new connection. Want to get out of here? To empower many.
This is unbelievable.
It doesn't take a superhero to bring forces together. We all have the power to reach out.
Let's go!
And help someone feel like they belong.
Pretty cool, huh?
We are stronger together.
Feel the beat of nature at a park or forest near you. Find a forest and music inspired by nature at discovertheforest.org.
Fostering a pet for a friend or neighbor can keep families together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
You can talk to me if you're feeling sad.
Thanks for hearing me out, bro.
Whenever you need to talk, I'm here, okay?
Welcome back. New Destiny's mission is to end the cycle of domestic violence as well as homelessness for low-income families and individuals by developing and connecting them to safe, permanent, and affordable housing as well as services. Governor Kathy Hochul recently had a 5-year housing plan focused on affordable housing and mitigating barriers to access public assistance in the 2023 enacted budget. Joining me now and sharing more is the Executive Director of New Destiny Housing, Nicole Branca, and we thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Daren. It's nice to be here again.
Glad to have you back and sharing again. Talk to me a little bit about the issue where we are dealing with this issue of housing and homelessness, because as we look at homelessness across New York City, some would think by now things would get better. But when we talk to people with boots on the ground, they say, Daren, it's not as easy as that.
Yeah, I mean, we all see it as New Yorkers. We see homelessness everywhere we go. Our organization, New Destiny, focuses laser-like on families and individuals who are homeless and are homeless because of domestic violence, and they're really a hidden population. So there's a network of domestic violence shelters throughout the city, and we have thousands of families, 10,000 people a year who cycle through these shelters. And we're focused on trying to build as much housing as we can for these families, and whenever possible, prevent them from having to go into shelter in the first place. You probably know this because of the work that you do, but domestic violence is the #1 reason for families entering shelter in the city.
Yeah, when we talk about domestic violence, it's pretty huge. It's pretty huge across the city. It's pretty huge across the state. Give us some insight as to where we are post-COVID, because we know during COVID, families were forced to stay together. And from all that we know, a lot of numbers continue to rise, particularly coming out of COVID. How have we been able to navigate the rise that's come since COVID?
Yeah, it continues to be one of the #1 reasons why people seek shelter. COVID was, not only kept families in abusive households, but as you mentioned, the economy also tanked, and a lot of our families are low income and work jobs that were service jobs that were lost during the pandemic, and we've seen a very slow recovery. And the families that we're working with now have experienced a few extra years of trauma by not being able to go into a safe place. So we're definitely seeing higher rates of PTSD, depression, anxiety, and are seeking more mental health services to help our families. And that's actually it's our top legislative priority for this year. We're very pleased to see Governor Hochul, as you mentioned, with her housing plan, and the mayor have done a lot to increase resources for domestic violence survivors and their families. But we have a lot of families that we already house, and we also need to protect those families from recidivating back to homelessness, going back to their abuser. So our top priority is actually having the state increase the funding that they have for a very old program called the New York State Supportive Housing Program that doesn't give providers like New Destiny enough money to keep both case managers and security in our buildings. So we are very lucky to have council members like Councilmember Sanchez who give us discretionary money, and some foundations that give us money. But the state really needs to prioritize helping the families that are, one foundation grant or one council member grant away from losing either their case managers that are helping them recover from the trauma and or the security guards that are keeping their buildings safe. So we're really hoping that the legislature and the governor focuses on increasing this old night shift program this year.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the problem, but we know the solution is tied to permanent supportive housing. That's something that so many people are advocating for. But walk us behind the door. Give me a little bit about permanent supportive housing and why that is of such value to victims of domestic violence.
Absolutely. Domestic violence survivors and a lot of other people who have experienced homelessness, they obviously need subsidized housing to climb out of the situation that they're in. And with domestic violence survivors, it's that much more important to find a safe space because their obviously lives are at risks, or they wouldn't have fled and left their home for shelter. And supportive housing provides this affordable housing, so no tenant pays more than a third of their income in rent, which gives them long-term stability in their apartment, and they have a lease and they can stay as long as they want. But what supportive housing does is it provides on-site services. So, our families have gone through a lot of trauma. As I mentioned, they often experience, and not just it's usually the mother, but the children as well have lived through this vicarious trauma or the abuse themselves. And so we provide on-site services and supportive housing to help both the parent and the children find a new community. They've left everything behind, but then also work with them to gain the resources that they need and get the help that they need to recover from this PTSD and anxiety and depression and a myriad of other issues that we would all expect would happen if you're living with abuse for years on end.
There is a concern by many on the inside, Nicole, about where the supportive housing rates are, because when you talk about funding supportive housing rates and getting funding into supportive housing rates, we know that there hasn't been a raise or an increase, if you will, in just about 3 decades, if I'm correct. So talk to me about
That's right.
Talk to me about how we're going to be able to break that cycle, given the fact that we need to attack supportive housing. No question about it. So you got a problem of A, supportive housing, and then B, I got to get these rates increased to be able to meet the needs, particularly with the cost of living increase.
Yeah, so we're fighting this on two ends. First is this Nice Ship program. That's the one that's 3 decades old, the New York State supportive housing program, and that is that's where we can't afford the staff that we have, and never mind cost of living adjustments, which we obviously want to give our staff year in and year out, and living wages. But then we're also fighting to increase funding so that we can build more supportive housing, and that's the Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative. We're working with the Supportive Housing Network of New York and providers across the state so that we can increase the funding for this program called ESHI, so we can develop more supportive housing, because you can't build the buildings unless you have a commitment for the operating and services funding for the building. So it really does fuel production, and if we want to build more buildings and provide this housing for DV survivors and veterans and other families and individuals who are struggling with homelessness, then we need the state to increase these ESHI rates as well.
Yeah. Make our public aware of the initiatives that you have via legislation. I know there's some things you're really advocating for. How can the public really get behind you and support some of these initiatives? Let's, first of all, make the public aware of what these initiatives are and how they can put their voice to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. We have 2 legislative priorities that we're working on as New Destiny, and then with larger coalitions across the state. One is to increase the HAVP is what it's called, and it's getting a lot of traction. So we're hopeful this would create a new rental subsidy for the state. So most people are familiar with Section 8, but that's a federal program, and only 1 in 4 families that are eligible for Section 8 receive it. So year after year after year, we can't rely on the federal government to make up for this need. And so we're asking the state to do their part and create this homeless assistance voucher program, which would be comparable to Section 8 and help meet this need. And then the other legislative priority that we're working on is very similar. It's the city's rental subsidy, because we think they should also help with this crisis. And that is, they've already created the program. It's called City FEPS. And we're hopeful that they will expand the eligibility to include immigrant families. We have a lot of mixed status families in our work with helping domestic violence survivors, and this would really open the door for families who weren't born here but live here and have experienced this abuse and need help.
When we talk about the ears of elected officials, what do you think? Are you getting the necessary traction that you need to have supportive ear for this matter. When it talks about homelessness, domestic violence victims, the things that we're talking about here, housing, are our public officials really stepping up to the plate in terms of hearing, but not just hearing, but really, because everybody hears, right? But I need you to address this.
Yeah.
So talk to me about addressing. Are you comfortable with that?
I mean, you never know until the budget's over, but we do feel like the leadership in Albany is listening to us. You know, the governor has domestic violence in her family, and she got her start opening a domestic violence program in upstate New York, and so we're always hopeful that she'll continue to support programs like this, and then we have great leadership. We have Assemblymember Rosenthal and Senator Kavanaugh have been supportive year in and year out with programs like this. So we're hopeful. Yes.
Yeah. But if things don't go your way, let's just look at it as a positive. If we don't see these things happen, how far of a setback would that be for what you do?
Well, again, we have 10,000 people cycle through the DV shelter system each year, and thousands more go through the city's general population shelter. So, and we can't make a dent in that, and we can't help those families if we don't get more resources. And we were lucky this last year to get an emergency program from the federal government through the American Rescue Plan, but that ends this year. And so, we've been able to stem the tide because of this federal program. But if the state and city don't step up, then we'll see an increase in shelter. Absolutely, especially, I'm sure you're covering the eviction rates going back up. So we fully anticipate, if there's not something done, to see evictions go up and more people end up in shelter, including DV survivors.
Well, we knew that once the housing moratorium rates ended, or I should say the housing moratorium ended, and you knew that people were going to have to be forced to pay rent in certain situations, we were going to see more record evictions, and landlords have been saying that to us for a long period of time. And then when you couple into those people, couple in with that other groups, we knew for certain that we'd be seeing, particularly in the area of homeless and then also domestic violence victims, that number would potentially increase. And so there is a great awareness. I don't know if the state is as prepared as we think they should be. But certainly I think that we have to raise the bar to let somebody know these victims really need some assistance. And we're not asking for something. We're not asking for a handout. We're really asking for a hand up.
That's right. And one other priority I didn't mention is around public assistance. That also hasn't been increased in decades. And like Social Security, it needs to be indexed to inflation so that our lowest income New Yorkers can afford to pay rent and pay for other necessities. And so, as New Destiny is also a landlord, right? So we have huge arrears in our buildings. We're a nonprofit and we're doing everything we can to keep our tenants, but we also, when they're in difficult situations, when they lose jobs, when the economy is as tight as it is, the job market's as tight as it is, the housing market is as tight as it is, we really need the state to provide our families with more income any way they can. And this is an opportunity to right a long-term wrong with decades of not increasing the cash assistance rate in the state. So we're feeling somewhat good about that because we're hearing both the administration and the legislators talk about this. So that would certainly go a long way to keep families in their housing and not go in droves to housing court and be evicted.
Yeah. How does it get to a place? Can you give us some examples? Because when we make the correlation between homelessness and domestic violence, some people can't make that correlation. So can you just make the correlation for some of our viewers as to how these two coexist?
Sure. So with domestic violence, a typical case is somebody's experiencing physical abuse in the home, but in 95 to 99% of the cases, it's also economic abuse. So they don't have any access to their own bank account, their own credit cards. Their credit is usually terrible and they don't even know about it because they haven't controlled it. And so, when somebody decides enough is enough and I need to I need to be safe for myself and kids if they have kids, then they're leaving with nothing. They have absolutely nothing. And so they may not have, the family and friends that they have are all connected to their abuser probably. So, when they have a safe second bedroom or couch to stay on, they do. But more often than not, they have to leave their entire community, their whole network. And unfortunately, that means shelter. And in New York City, we're lucky to have a legal right to shelter, so people do have a safe haven to go to. But that's not a long-term solution. Kids are, shouldn't be living in shelter and going to school. And we need to find permanent homes that are safe and allow families to start to rebuild a new community and have staff on site that can help them, build their finances back up, et cetera.
And that's the work that New Destiny does, right, Nicole? I mean, you really help people get back on their feet. So educate our viewers a little bit more on how that happens. You have a family, you have an individual that really goes through the situation. What's the process? I come through and I say, New Destiny, I need some help. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, so there's really two ways of accessing New Destiny. One is through the family justice centers. There's one in each of the 5 boroughs, and you can find information online. And if you come in and you say, I need housing, you'll be connected to one of our staff. The other way is through shelter. We also take referrals from shelter for our housing that we develop and run. And sorry.
No worries.
The downside of hybrid work these days. And once you get connected to us, if you go to the FJCs, we will find you an apartment in the community. So if you need a Section 8 voucher, or hopefully one of these new state vouchers, we will work with you to find a landlord that will take you and your family and find you a safe space. And then we will provide you services to make sure that you are stable in your new apartment, whether that's finding a new school for your kids, some healthcare, mental health care, financial literacy training, what have you, whatever it takes to get your family back on their feet again. And then if you go into our buildings, we have those services right on site, and we will provide whatever case management you need and connect you to as many services as it takes. And then we work with you, especially in our buildings, because we're right there with you. There's an amazing family support program team that does, has everything from a holistic care of doing yoga and meditation to draw families out and give them a safe space where they feel like they can open up, to more in-depth case management to help them with connecting to resources and working with them on the trauma that they and their kids have gone through, and work with them to open up and start to heal.
Yeah. As a person with boots on the ground, what kind of trends are you seeing in your work, given the fact that we're at a place where spring is just about coming up, but we also see that also we're coming out of the winter. There are a lot of things that happen during this time of year. Are you seeing any particular trends during this time of year?
Yeah, I mean, there's always an increase in family homelessness in the summer when school's out. So, that's always something we're watching. But something we've started to see more of lately is individuals who are experiencing domestic violence, and it's not just women; it's predominantly women, but both women and men are fleeing their abuser, and they don't have a safe space to go. Most domestic violence shelter is for families, and so we're increasingly concerned about individuals who are fleeing violence and don't even have shelter. So it's whenever possible, we try to get them right into housing, but we at least need the shelter there. So that's a trend that we're seeing, that we're we know a lot of our partners like Safe Horizon, Urban Resource Institute are working on to create more of a safety net for individuals.
Nicole, somebody out there watching say, listen, I want to be connected to the services and find out more about the services you provide. How do they go about doing that?
Yeah, family justice centers. The mayor's office to end domestic and gender-based violence. It's on their website. There's phone numbers, there's the hours that they're open, and there's the addresses. They can go to the family justice centers, and we are the resource if you walk in to say, I need housing. And so you get connected to our staff right away.
Yeah. And before we go, I just want to ask you that question because you did allude to that a little bit earlier on. You were talking about victims of domestic violence. And traditionally, we know that women will be the majority. But from your perspective right now, you're seeing a lot more men come forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's still 90% women and mostly families as well. But as we're thinking about policies and developing housing and shelter, we also need to consider the individuals, young adults, runaway homeless youth. There's a lot of people who need this support. And it's not just the traditional family, but it's still mostly the traditional family.
All right, Nicole, we got to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us and being with us. And certainly want to thank you for the work that New Destiny is doing to help those in the area of domestic violence. Glad to see you one more time.
Thank you.
All right.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you, too.
Okay, take care.
All right, take care. Well, we're taking a quick break. We want you to stay with us. We have another guest, a couple more to share with you here on the Social Justice Forum.
Most hiring algorithms would scream me out.
Some bosses couldn't see me as a leader.
I've run this place for 20 years, but I still need to prove that I'm more than what you see on paper.
I've been running code as long as I've been able to reach a keyboard.
This is what I do. It's second nature for me, coordinating 100 details at once.
It's the way my mind works. I have a very mechanical brain.
I sold them on my skills.
You gotta be so good they can't ignore you.
My magic is
analytics and empathy. That's how I'm getting clients. You have to have the confidence in yourself to show up and defy the odds.
I'm more than who I am on paper.
I never got a college degree. And today, I'm the CEO of my own company. People want to tell me I'm one in a million, when actually I'm one of millions. Stars are all around us. It's time for them to shine.
My character, Shazam, knows all about growing up in a family full of teenage superheroes. They're bold.
Where's everyone going?
To fight crime.
Okay.
Adventurous. Shazam! There's never a dull moment. And no matter what happens, they'll always have your back. All they need is a place to grow and be themselves. And the best part is, you don't have to be a superhero to adopt a teen. Learn more about adopting a teen from foster care. Visit adoptuskids.org. You can't imagine the reward.
And welcome back. The Fortune Society is nationally recognized for developing model programs, helping people with criminal justice histories to be assets to their communities. Now, the Fortune Society, David Rothenberg Center for Public Policy, recently unveiled the organization's 2023 legislative priorities, calling on city and state lawmakers to remove discriminatory barriers for people with criminal justice involvement, as well as expanding access to legal services and protections for people with conviction histories and improving conditions inside jails as well as prisons. Join me now. We've got the Deputy Chief Executive Officer at the Fortune Society, Stanley Richards, and thank you, Stanley, for coming to share with us. And you told us a little off camera that you are just coming off the loss of your father-in-law. And we certainly want to thank you publicly for taking the time to share with us in the midst of grief and pain. Certainly thank you for being with us, and our condolences to you.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the condolences. You know, I think about the blessings of life, and my father-in-law was one of those blessings for my wife and myself. So I'm glad to be here to continue this conversation around criminal justice reform and what we can do as a city and a state and a nation to really reduce the collateral consequences of a conviction and disproportionately impacting so many Black and brown people throughout the United States. We can and must do better. And I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, well, let's dive right into it because we can do better. And I think when we talk about restorative justice, it doesn't always go well, particularly for those in communities of color. You've been at the forefront of really a lot of policy and lobbying to make sure that things can get better. When we look at the state of reform and how we deal with the criminal justice system and also our jails, I mean, what do you see give us your assessment for how you see things citywide?
I think for me, it's sort of a two-pronged approach and view. One, taking a step back and really looking at how much progress we have made over the years. And I think that continues to feed the fuel of our passion and hope that we can have a better society when we create conditions both for those who are incarcerated and conditions in our communities where our communities are safe and they're not disproportionately impacted by mass incarceration. And so when you look over the decades in New York State particularly, we have done significant work in reducing our footprint in incarceration. In New York City jails, we went from at our peak 22,000 people incarcerated in our New York City jails. We're down now to 5,900. We've gotten much lower. We're starting to tick our way back up, which is troubling for us. And in New York State, we was at 72,000 people, and we're around 33,000 right now. And so we've seen significant reductions in our footprint, and that gives great motivation and hope that we can do better. And what Fortune Society has been talking about, what we're advocating for in some of the policies is now that we have begun to shrunk our footprint on mass incarceration and at the same time seeing safe communities. We're seeing an uptick in crime over the last year or so. But overall, we have seen a significant reduction in our crime as we've seen a reduction in our mass incarceration. So we know we can have fewer people incarcerated and we can have safe communities. And so now we've turned our attention to the policies surrounding the collateral consequences of a conviction.
And for yourself, I mean, we talk around this, the city a lot about what's going on, and it looks like crime is going up in certain areas, and we know we have our challenges right here in the borough of the Bronx. But when you do look at it on an overall perspective, crime is going down, right? And you have incarcerations that are going down, and some things are working. So when we can talk about what's working, what can we put our hand on to say, hey, this is really something we should be paying attention to?
Well, we know it, right? We know that providing economic opportunities for people impacted by mass incarceration is a vehicle for helping people to rebuild their lives, re-engage with their communities, and support their communities. We know providing higher education in jails and in prison and providing access to higher education when people come home is a pathway for people to build brighter futures. We know that when we provide stable, supportive housing for people who are impacted by incarceration, we know we provide them an opportunity to reunite with family, integrate into the communities, and have a safe place to live. There are sort of the pillars of what it takes to help people rebuild their lives post incarceration, and how do we develop enough supportive off ramps so that we don't have to have so many people incarcerated. And that's one of the things Fortune Society does. We have multiple programs. We have alternatives to incarceration. We have reentry supportive housing. We have education and employment. We have licensed substance abuse treatment and mental health treatment, giving people the kind of tools and resources they need to rebuild their lives. What we have lacked, I think, in the city, in the state, and in this country is a commitment to see those kinds of services through in a very robust way. What we try to do and what we tend to do is to look at the problem and invest a nickel in the problem and expect the problem to be addressed. And the same way we've invested billions of dollars in this country to build prisons and jails, we need to likewise invest significant resources in reentry housing, in substance abuse and mental health treatment, in employment opportunities, and in housing.
Yeah. Talk to me about housing, because when I think about incarcerated individuals, what the goal is really for them to be able to not get into this area called recidivism. And we know that recidivism is something that is happening, and we want to try to curb that. But many times when you talk to a lot of those who've been incarcerated, they'll tell you that recidivism occurs when I can't get the opportunity to change where I live, my environment. And so that housing is so critical, right? And so can you give us a little insight into some of the barriers? Because when I think about those who are incarcerated, yeah, if I'm trying to get an apartment, if I'm trying to get a house, here it is. I'm trying to get it, but then I got to fill out this form, and that background check can be the biggest problem for me being able to land safely.
That's right. And that's true in housing and in employment. We see people with convictions discriminated against just because they have the conviction. There is this sense that if you have a conviction that you're going to be a troubled tenant, that you're not going to make a good employee, that somehow that incident in your life determines who you are as a person, as a tenant, or as an employee. And so we have been advocating for the fair chance for housing legislation that basically prohibits landlords from discriminating against people based solely on their conviction. And we've built it in such a way that landlords can still follow the law in terms of their ability to view if someone has a sex offense, but that for someone with a conviction, overall, they can't use that conviction to discriminate against someone. And that opens up existing housing opportunities for people with convictions who have a job, who want to find, need a place to live, and is looking for that particular place to live, but can't get access to it because when they fill out the application, the landlord does the background check. They see 10 years ago they was convicted of a burglary or a robbery or an assault. And then that becomes who they are when they have long paid their price, paid their dues, and now they have reintegrated and they're looking for an opportunity to start a new life.
Talking about Clean Slate New York, and that goes in line with what we're talking about. So make us aware.
Absolutely. Clean slate is something I think we absolutely need to do. Clean slate provides an opportunity for people who have been convicted and they serve their time and they're no longer on parole to have their record automatically sealed. And it provides people like me who have a conviction can get their record automatically sealed after a certain period of time. You're off parole, you have no new arrests, no new convictions, that it would automatically be sealed from the general public. And there are some exclusions, right? Like law enforcement, the courts, and those systems will still have access to the record, but it just gets automatically sealed. And then it's 1 year for a misdemeanor, it's 3 years for a felony, and then there's an automatic expungement after 5 years for a misdemeanor, 7 years for a felony that provides further protections. And it makes sense. I'll give you an example for me. I was released in 1991. I haven't had an arrest or conviction since then. I've been the first deputy commissioner of the New York City Department of Corrections. I've been appointed to numerous boards from city government and New York City Board of Corrections. I'm the deputy CEO of Fortune Society. My record is still available. If I apply for an apartment, if I apply for a job, an employer could do a background check and we'll see. My conviction happened in 1980. My last conviction happened in 1986. I got released in 1991. But that's still available. And when is enough enough? I have demonstrated my rehabilitation. I have demonstrated my commitment to being an asset to my community and to my city and to my state. That should I still be viewed as the person who was convicted in 1986 and served my time, successfully completed probation, and was the second highest ranking correction official in one of the country's largest jails? There comes a time where we just have to say, people have paid their dues and they deserve a second chance. And the clean slate does that automatically.
Yeah. I want to talk something that's near and dear to a lot of us around here, and that's close Rikers Island. We know Rikers has been a challenge for so many years. The cries have gone out for so many years, and it seems as though we're a little bit closer than we've ever been before to the Close Rikers Island movement. For somebody with boots on the ground, give us where we are today and what we can expect.
Well, we are still pushing for the closure of Rikers Island. The mayor said, it's the law Rikers needs to close by 2027. But we're not seeing all of the indicators moving in the right way. One being the population. We're seeing the population go up. As I said, it's roughly around 5,900 right now. We need to get that population down to 3,300, 3,500 in order to be able to close Rikers and move people to the borough-based jail system. Here's a simple fact about Rikers. Rikers is a place that is a stain on this city. It hurts those who are incarcerated there. It hurts the officers who work there and the civilians who work there. It hurts the families who have to come there. And it is time for us to close that. I firmly believe that we can have a smaller footprint where only those who are absolutely necessary for us to keep our community safe, to need to get their cases adjudicated, and we can do that with a much smaller footprint. That the facilities we have could be centered on the humanity of everybody who's in there, those who are detained there, those who work there, and those who have to visit. And right now, we don't have that. We have a system that just permeates hurt, dysfunction, isolation, confusion, hopelessness, and it does massive damage to all.
Yeah.
There are no winners with our current Rikers Island system. There are no winners.
Yeah, it's quite infuriating to a lot of people. We will continue to follow that story as it develops here at our station as well. We only have a couple of minutes left, but I do want to get an opportunity to let you share how people can partner in some of the great work that you're doing in raising awareness and advocacy.
Thank you. They can come and join us. They can come see our work. Visit our website, www.fortunesociety.org. Look at our policy work. We are often pulling together community organizing events. We are willing to come to churches and communities to share what we're doing on a policy level. We want people to join with us because we want to lead with the love of what we see in front of us. One of our sayings at Fortune is, we don't see you for what you did or how much time you served. We see you for who you are when you walk through our doors. And our job is to hold who you can be until you begin to see it for yourself, you begin to believe it, and you begin to live it. And so we invite communities to come join us in centering our work on that kind of humanity. We believe that we can have a much better society and communities and system when we work together to build a system that holds people accountable, is centered on humanity, and has procedural fairness and procedural justice.
Well, Stanley, we want to thank you so much for being with us and sharing a lot of information. The Fortune Society does some great work, and glad to get you here on the show, and thank you again for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All righty. Stanley Richards, Deputy Chief Executive Officer of the Fortune Society, our guest, and we want to thank him for being with us. We have come to the end of the show today. Hope you enjoyed this week's discussion on the Bronx Social Justice Forums. We want you to rewatch this edition, and you can catch the recablecast right here on BronxNet TV or BronxNet.org. Now, if you want to join in the conversation and present your point of view, you can do that by visiting our social media pages at BronxNet TV. And we tell you, join us next week as we continue to elevate the discussion and bring further awareness to the issues that matter the most across the globe. I'm your host, Daren Jaime, saying take care. God bless.